Hi, I'm Sunny Dean.
And I'm Scott Drakeford.
And this is the Publishing Radio podcast. In 2022, we both launched debut novels in the same genre with the same publisher in the same year. But despite having very similar starts, our books and subsequently each of our careers went in very different directions.
That pattern repeats itself throughout the industry over and over. Why do some books succeed while others seem to be dead on arrival?
In this podcast, we aim to answer those questions and many more, along with how to build and maintain an author career.
Everyone signing a contract deserves to know what they're really signing up for. In an industry that loves its secrets, we'll be sharing real details from real people. We'll cover the gamut of life as a Big Five published author, from agents to publishing contracts, finances, and more.
So last episode, Scott and I touched a little bit on part of our publishing journeys over how Scott was kind of screwed over from the start, whereas I was better set up for success. We didn't have a chance to go into that into detail. And this whole podcast will be deconstructing our experiences. But on today's episode, we're going to talk about a part which I think is a linchpin to all author experiences, the bookseller, and the kind of the corporate book buy, how your book gets into stores, what happens when they're there, the role of booksellers, their significance in this process, and the ways in which your publisher handles all of that, which have an impact on your book's launch and performance. So today we are really excited to invite three fantastic guests, the first of which is Jeremy Greathouse. You might know him as JT Greathouse.
If you know me at all.
Jeremy is both a fantasy author and a bookseller, so he's very uniquely positioned. And we also have the wonderful Claire and Kerry, who have kindly agreed to join us today. And after today's episode, Scott and I will get together and do a deconstruction episode later. But for the moment, I just want to welcome Jeremy, Claire, and Kerry.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Happy to be here.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about your bookstore, what you guys are all about, and then we'll launch into some questions?
The Auntie's Bookstore here in Spokane opened 1978, so we've been around for a while. We are the biggest independent bookstore in our area. We're right in the heart of downtown.
Yeah, maybe even between Seattle and Moscow, probably,
yeah, probably.
Right? Yeah.
I think so. I can't think of another one. So, I mean, we're kind of a big deal, but
regionally kind of a big deal.
I am the general manager at Auntie's. I've been there for about 6 years. I do a lot of front list buying, a lot of sideline buying, day-to-day reorder stuff. I do a lot of.
My name's Claire, and I've been at Auntie's for about 4 years. And I used to run our events program and then transitioned into doing more wholesale buying for the store, bringing more front list in. And I've been doing that for about a year.
And then I'm Jeremy, and I've just been a bookseller there. Used to do consignment when I worked full time, so getting a lot of local authors' books into the store. And now I just work part time there, mostly because I can't leave. They've got hooks in me emotionally, and also selling me books on the cheap. So
I think we're like a generalist bookstore.
Mm-hmm.
We stock a little bit of everything.
Yep.
We have to have things that are appealing to sort of all demographics. We've got a really healthy children's section. So we really do just do everything.
Do everything, yeah.
Cool. So you guys mentioned a whole bunch of terms, some of which I know, but some I don't. So if you don't mind, before we launch into the real questions or whatever, and if it's okay with you, Sonia, can I ask real quick what each of these means? So front list means?
Front list is new stuff that's coming out. So when publishers put out their big sort of omnibus catalogs, it's seasonal. So it's like spring, summer, fall, and winter quarters. They put out these big catalogs with like all the new shit that's coming out. And then backlist then would be the stuff that isn't the new stuff. I forget exactly when the time frame is. There's kind of a specific time frame, but I don't off the top of my head remember when it is. Just basically like new releases versus sort of the old standbys.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so you use the term sideline buying. Is that to you backlist?
No, sideline. We're primarily a bookstore, but people love to buy other things. I think one of the ways that bookstores have to survive through the big box guys, and then of course the A word that won't be named, is to kind of have it's kind of like a side hustle. So we have, in addition to
Yeah.
books, we sell tea and
Mm-hmm.
stickers and T-shirts, and we try to keep it kind of all like, okay, what's the thing that you need to have an afternoon of reading experience? And we try to provide
Yeah.
that. Other bookstores have gone way harder in some of the sort of the gifty sideline ways, but yeah, socks are.
Oh my God, people spend so much goddamn money on
It's
socks.
okay.
We sell more socks than books at this point.
But it is funny sometimes to have someone be like $30 for a hardcover book, and then turn around and buy 7 pairs of socks for $12 each, and you're just like, I guess.
How long until it's a combo bookshop liquor store?
Ooh,
It might. We're getting there.
So I will say this for the benefit, since you don't necessarily know us, and for anyone who maybe is starting not at episode 1, Scott and I have the same publisher. We debuted in the same year. We write in the same genre, but we had very different experiences in our launch years. And we are kind of looking at publishing from that angle of what happens when authors fall on other sides, opposite sides of that mid-list dividing line. And I did notice that when our publisher was preparing for my debut year, they were really going after booksellers very hard. I don't know. I'm guessing your experience was not that, Scott.
This is the point in the podcast where I decide how much I want to say. I couldn't even get answers. I would ask about, hey, I'm hearing that this is kind of a big deal in getting ready for launch. Like, what are you doing, and what can I do to help? Right? Because I was full-time already at that point. I was very willing to dig in and do whatever I could to help. And it was just, vague answers or silence or deflection. Mm-hmm. And I was left very confused, but also at the same time, I could feel it, I could feel it coming. I kind of got a sense at that point of like, oh God, this isn't going to go anything like what I thought it was going to be. And I learned some of the terms that we're talking about now, just the basic stuff. So like front list and back list, just because I happened upon I don't know how you say it in correct English or German, but Edelweiss, however you say it. And I probably heard about that from Sunyi, actually. And, I saw the tour the tour catalog come out, right? And like, I had to scroll all the way down to find my book, and like, they didn't have my cover in there. And I think my bio was wrong at that point. Like,
it was the wrong author.
Yeah, it was the wrong author. Yeah. My real name is Scott Smith, and I didn't publish under the name Scott Smith because there's another Scott Smith who publishes thrillers, and he's also a screenwriter. Yeah, and he's fairly well known. Like, he's my agent's favorite thriller author. So my agent and my editor were like, yeah, you should probably find like another family name. And so Drakeford is family name. So come to find out, I look up the catalog and they have that guy's bio. Like, they ignored the bio I sent them. They ignored the bio that my agent had given them. And like, my editor is fully aware that I'm not this other Scott Smith, and I'm using this name because of the other Scott Smith. And yet they literally just went online, I guess, and stole this other guy's bio. Like, he has film credits for whatever, books have been turned into movies. I'm like, what the fuck? This guy's he's gonna come sue me now. So anyway. Yeah, wow. My introduction to publisher catalogs was not great.
No, it sounds bad.
Say on the flip side that the same publisher basically said, we're going to hold your hand and do everything for you and don't worry about a thing. And that was a fairly accurate summary of my experience. So I have nothing to complain over and no one can sue me, but I'm very aware that I'm extremely lucky and privileged. So yeah, we're curious what that looks like from the bookseller side. If you see that divide between books and authors and how that comes across and how publishers push different titles or don't.
Yeah.
Definitely. We were just cringing at the no cover image thing, because it's like,
we have so little to go on.
Yeah.
So these catalogs are So I just did all of Macmillan Spring. So that's every imprint that Macmillan distributes and publishes. It's 700 titles.
Yeah.
And,
And that's pretty standard for like the big,
the big four,
big five, whatever it is now. Yeah, it's just like this huge list. And you get markups. So they send you, first you get sort of the big omnibus, and then a little bit later, your sales rep says, hey, I did markups for you. And so some of the 700 titles will have little notes about like, this is what this is about. This is, these are the reactions we're getting. These are the marketing things we're going to be doing for this title.
This is essentially why you should be paying attention to it. Whereas, I mean, every book in the 700-page catalog has, like remarks that are sort of quick. They have the detailed synopsis of the book, and then like a list of comparable titles, so you can look up sales data for those. And that's helpful. Yeah. Like to a point, right? Our meetings with our regional sales reps are the things that really show things, put things into relief a little bit more.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah. But it is interesting because there are definitely like, you can tell like, okay, these are the ones that they're like pushing.
Yeah, they're highlighted in yellow.
Right.
They
highlighted in yellow.
Extra artwork.
They have a ton of different like notes on them that are like, this is this, here are all these blurbs we have already, and like half the time there'll be a little thing on it that says lead read, so it's like, yep, this is, indie next priority, like they're really pushing it.
Yeah. Or the sales rep will say, this is such and such imprint's lead title for this quarter.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, and there's also, I mean, I don't know how this tracks for you, but we can download digital review copies. And which books have digital review copies for us to, because that's a big reason why I take a chance on things a lot of the time, is if I take a look at it and I think it's good.
Yeah.
And, I mean, even if it's got like a small print run, I'm like, oh, okay, slap this on a table, maybe we can sell it. Yeah,
totally.
Yeah. Where are you typically pulling those digital review copies from?
Directly from Edelweiss.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Very interesting.
A lot of us personally read from a very wide variety of things. We're interested in like smaller presses, and it is frustrating sometimes because there is sort of a lack of access to a lot of the things that I think we would be interested in bringing into the store. And oftentimes I'll just order blind anyway, because it's like, great cover, interesting premise, like
good blurbs. I like the press.
Yeah. That's like, I know that I like, new directions, so I'm going to take a chance on stuff that they're putting out. But it is frustrating sometimes when you're like, I want to know about this book though. Like, I know that like Colleen Hoover's going to sell, but like, tell me more about this other stuff. Like,
no, and that's
pushing this stuff.
That's an area where I feel like we have a lot of power. Like the kind of makeup of the staff at our bookstore has changed a lot in the last 3 or 4 years. Yeah. And with the things that people put, like we sell books that are like kind of obscure just because one person on staff liked them a lot. So I wouldn't be surprised with some of these like smaller press books if we're selling 50% more than another bookstore in the region just because of like one staff pick. Like, and so we like have the power to move those things.
We do.
Like, think about how many copies of When We Cease to Understand the World we've sold, Claire, just because you and I both wrote shelf talkers for it. And like, and like nobody else probably is selling anywhere near that many copies of it, even though it's like an award-winning book, because it just flew under the radar.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and when you read the blurb for that, you're not necessarily like, that's not a bestseller sounding book. I mean, it sounds like, well, that's a little weirder than what people, or like,
but your shelf talker, Jeremy, says this is simultaneously like, what is it? The best work of horror and science. And like, I mean, it's just so like the bookseller recommendations really matter. Yeah. Or even just like where it is on the store. Like if we like something, we're going to put it on our display, and it's going to sell on a display. Yeah. Yeah. Which is a little disheartening sometimes, is like things you get lost.
Yeah. Well, yeah. But that's kind of the power though of having a bookseller vouch for something, is there are so many books on our shelves, like, and people come in and you see their eyes glaze over a little bit. You've got the people who are like all they want to do is spend hours browsing the stacks. But then you have people who come in and they're just like, oh my God, I just want to read something fun. Like they don't know where to go. So if you can stand up and go like, this is the book you want. They're like, yes, this is the book I want. Thank you. And it's great. Like you can really get some interesting things into people's hands that way.
Yeah, but the problem is like we can't do that if the publishers don't get us information about the book, right? So like when new things are coming out, it feels like I learn about things months after they've come out that I think are really cool, that like we never got arcs for, or we never heard about, or like the publisher didn't
reader copies.
Yeah. They didn't do anything to like let us know that this existed, and then it's only after one of us has sort of looked, like seen it on the shelf because we ordered like one copy and then read it, that we've realized, oh, this is amazing and we should be selling this, right?
Yeah, I mean, I remember Scott telling me that you can go into it in a minute, Scott, but basically that he couldn't get Tor to send ARCs out to booksellers at all. And on the flip side, I mean, I've got two publishers, one for the American, one for the UK side, and I'm in the UK. My UK publisher was sending custom cake pops to the bookstores here. And
it's terrible.
Just that disparity blew my mind. It's like, I'm literally like, I spent 2 days driving around bookstores in like a 60-mile radius just delivering cake pops.
That was another thing, is I knew I was well and truly fucked when my editor came back and said, oh yeah, we're not doing arcs for books anymore. And I was like, aren't you though? I saw Orbit doing the special edition arcs for Richard around that time, and I had met Sunny around that time.
I had galleys and arcs.
Yeah.
Sorry, man. Sorry, man. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Really
yeah. Well,
sorry.
That was an interesting journey, but I just want to back up real quick because we mentioned some things that people might not be aware of, even new authors, because I found out about this relatively late. So we referenced Edelweiss, that, and correct me if I'm wrong, especially Kerry, Claire, and Jeremy. But Edelweiss is just a site for essentially like wholesaling information, right, from publishers?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's and I think it's grown even just in the last like 5 or 6 years a lot. But all of the major publishing houses upload their full catalogs, both front list and back list. So you have access to basically everything that's still in print from these publishers. And more and more smaller publishers and presses are getting onto Edelweiss, which is really cool because it's just a really straightforward, and I would think so much less expensive way of getting like your catalogs out to buyers than trying to send out print catalogs. That just has to get astronomically expensive for small presses. Like you can't do it, but at least like if they can upload their catalog to Edelweiss and start sending out email blasts of like, hey, come check out, Verso Fiction, or whatever, like,
and having it all be linked with, there's a place for booksellers to leave reviews, for Indie Next, which is kind of the trade public newsletter that nominates books and highlights books. Also, that's where all of the sort of bidding for events happens.
You know more about this than I do, but like sort of they send out like grid lists. It's their grids, and they send out these lists of like,
this is who is going on tour. This is what we're looking for, and I can raise my hand and say, yes, at Auntie's Bookstore, we would like to host this person. Here's why it's a good fit.
If you are an author, you can make an account on Edelweiss. Any person can, as far as I know. You're limited, I think, depending what type of account you have, but there is a ton of information there, some of it more useful than others. I think the print runs always through me because they appear to be a complete fantasy, totally disconnected with reality.
Yeah.
And particularly tours were just kind of, it is, the phrase my agent said is it's more of a vibe than an actual fact. So I think my print run on Edelweiss was listed at about 150, and we were maybe 30, which was still a solid print run on the day, but it's not 150K. So
mine was listed at, I believe, 75,000, and they printed 10,000.
Yeah, it's total fantasy. It's a vibe.
I know of other debut authors, because I mostly know debuts, but I know of other debuts that were, publicized at 75 or 100, and they had 5,000, 6,000 printed. So yeah, there is no
that number goes up before they know what the print is, because I
Yeah.
think print runs decided like the month before you go. So they're saying, well, we hope, in our wildest dreams.
I think that many things in publishing are this way. Many of the numbers that you receive as an author or as a bookstore in marketing material is an optimistic estimate, right? It's like, we would like to do this, but like, because we get a lot of advanced reader copies that come with, like, on the back of the arc will be the promotional plan, or like, here's what we're going to try to do to push this book, and it'll say like national tour, and then that never actually materializes for the book. The national tour might be like Boston, New York, and like Philadelphia, right?
Yeah.
But it's a lot of like, here's what we would like to do for this book, and if enough people decide to order it to their store, we might do some of these things, because that will indicate that there's momentum for it. But none of it is a promise.
Never believe promises in publishing.
Yeah.
If you're an author, just throwing that out there, like, they will promise you the world. And even if they promise you a lead title, I think in the end, money talks and action talks, doesn't it? So
Contracts too. Even
Contracts,
then,
yeah.
it's not 100, but yeah,
Contract is better than them saying something.
100%.
So
Yeah.
how are initial ordering numbers determined for you guys? How do you decide this is going to be a big order or this is going to be a small order?
And real quick, before you answer that, did I hear right that every season, so 4 times a year, you get catalogs just from the big 5 that each have 700 to 800 books?
Yeah, most of us do more than one too.
Yeah.
Like Kerry's got.
Yeah. Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I do part of Penguin Random House. So Penguin Random House is a
huge.
behemoth.
I
so
also
it's
do
like split
part of-
into 3 different catalogs, and they're all burly. And then Simon and Schuster has like Simon and Schuster's catalog, and then Simon and Schuster's distributed, so like their partners catalog, and each one of those is like 600 to 800 titles. So it's like you're just like slogging through, and then HarperCollins is like massive, and then Harper Children's is also massive, and you're just like, oh boy. Like, when I first started doing it, because I had worked as a buyer for other places, and we did like smaller kind of book sections, and we just kind of like, it was all just like, this is cool, whatever, gut reaction to stuff. But yeah, when you're slogging through 800 titles.
Yeah. And especially like with stuff that, and I think I have like a lot of familiarity with things that I'm not like personally interested in.
Yeah.
But I mean, just from working at the bookstore for as long as I have. But if you're trying to pick which fucking cozy mystery you think is going to sell,
do we go with the knitting pun? Do we go with the fudge pun? Do we do the cake pun? Yeah, like, it's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard, and it is, like we were saying, some of them have more notes than others. Like, these are the guys that got the big advances, so we're like really pushing these guys. And then kind of by the end, sometimes it's almost like, did my rep run out of steam? Like, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, I know, when there's like 0 comps.
Yeah, you're just like, okay, well, I guess.
Yeah.
So from the author perspective, A, if your publisher isn't pushing it through your sales rep, or B, if the sales rep for your publisher's owner, right? Because it sounds like it's in our example, it would be a Macmillan rep, not a Tor rep, right?
Yeah, correct.
So, like, if they're sick or having a bad day, that when your book's coming out, you're just hosed.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it.
I mean, and I think it probably is like.
I think it starts before it gets to the rep.
Yeah,
like I think it happens way above the sales rep.
Because our sales reps are like, they're regional. They're like based in Seattle, so like.
And they also, I mean, like for 3 months, so for 3 months, presumably for 40 hours a week, they are looking at the same catalog we are.
Well, and honestly, you sort of put a little bit of stock or faith into the idea that your rep has like some insight onto, like some insight into like the books that are being published this quarter, but there's no way any of them have time to really pour over 600 to 800 titles in a couple of months, like it's just not possible. I would say a pretty heavy downside of there only being like a big 5 in the publishing industry is like, there's just so much, it's like so many titles are in the hands of so few that there's just no way everybody can get sort of the attention that they deserve, you
As
know?
Stephen King said during the Simon Schuster Penguin
Yeah.
hearing.
Yeah.
Competition seems good.
Seems like I've heard it's a good idea.
So going back to Sunyi's question, how do you determine how much of each book to order? So which and how many of each one?
Some of it's kind of no-brainer, you know? I mean, if it's like
Brandon Sanderson.
yeah, right. We're going heavy on that, you know, or like Colleen Hoover's got something out. Great. 12, 15 copies. And our, like, for us, for our store at least.
Yeah.
If we order more than like 24 copies, I mean, 24 copies is a big
it's
initial
a lot.
order for
Yeah.
us. We
Oh,
kind of
really?
try to think in terms of like, okay, what are we going to sell? How many copies? When I think of how many copies will I sell in the first like 2 weeks of having this, you know, like can I conceive of
Ah.
6 people coming in and wanting this, you know, like, okay, yes, 6 people. What about 8 people? What about 12 people? Like, how many people are going to wander in and go, hey, this book, I'll take it, you know?
And we do have like historical sales data. Like our system goes back 15 years.
Yeah.
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 I mean, and so
We're really lucky.
Historical sales data for your store?
For our
Or
store.
for
Store
Okay.
Yeah. So we can
Got
see
it.
every order we've made, every sale we've made, and what day that happened.
Yeah.
If it was tied to a particular customer, if they have an account with us, we can see that, which is also helpful. Like if we sell one book and it was something that somebody had to special order, I'm thinking maybe, but yeah.
But I feel like they're the sort of no-brainer ones. We've got a few authors that are like, this guy's Jess Walter, who lives in town. Jess Walter has a book coming out. We're ordering
600
copies probably, which is insane for us. It's totally wild, but totally the outlier. Jess Walter, Katie Robert too, another local romance author whose books have just gone off the charts over the last few years.
She was self-published for a long time. So that's fun.
But so those are the like sort of, if it's a Stephen King, if it's a, you know, like somebody that we know, we'll probably do 24, maybe like 36 if it's Christmas. That makes a huge difference too. If it's fourth quarter and we're like, okay, we might have one shot at ordering this, you know, like how many are we going to sell through the holidays?
And and on the other side of that, I'm not going to go very heavy if something's coming out in January.
Right. You know, honestly, a lot of it is just kind of knowing what works at our store, you know, like knowing what people come in and ask for.
Which I feel like you have a good handle on just from being on the floor and like even just shelving, like even just sort of the day-to-day task of like seeing what comes in the big boxes and then what like we have to then put on a shelf and like, you know, put on a cart and put on the shelf.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
And and a lot of it is like, I mean, it sucks to say it, but sometimes, I mean, like cover matters, you know, like
I feel like it really matters.
A kick-ass cover, someone's going to like, that is what makes people pick the book up in the first place.
Yeah.
Looking for what angle do people take on this? Is this something that I haven't seen recently? Is this something that I've randomly heard people asking about, you know, like,
or like, is this hot right now? Like I think about Circe, like there are a million Circe by Madeline Miller, which is a retelling of a Greek myth. Yeah. There are like 3 or 4.
3 or 4?
Can you stop the grimace? Yeah. It's a joke in our writer Discord, the retellings trend.
My friend Jai and I have just been screaming at each other, no more fairy tales!
Oh, no. Well, that's the thing too, I think, as a buyer is like the first one comes out and you're like, oh great, there's a market for this. And then a couple more come out and you're like, that's kind of interesting. And then all of a sudden, there are like 15 different titles and you're just like, okay, you know, like that's when it comes down to like, all right, now I gotta like scrutinize each one of these retellings to decide which one maybe is interesting and fresh, and which ones are just like, hey, have you heard of Circe? There's a certain point where you're just like, okay.
So I have kind of a hypothetical for you, Kerry and Claire, that I've wondered about in the past. But let's say you're looking at the catalog and there are 3 books out from the same imprint that are all vaguely similar. They're all chasing a trend, right? How do you make that decision between the 3 Greek myth retellings or whatever? If you're looking at 3 things that are like on paper very similar, how do you decide?
Is the author a known quantity? Is the cover good?
Sometimes I will have days where I'm good about trust my gut, which I totally believe as a buyer. You just kind of sometimes you just have to like go with the gut thing. And a lot of it is, okay, if I had to read one of these right now, which
Yeah.
one seems the most interesting
Yeah.
to me? Which one, if someone was like, my grandma just read Circe and she loved it, do you have anything else? It's like, which one would I read? Which one would I feel most comfortable being like, hey, no, if you're looking for something like this one seems the most interesting
Yeah.
to me. And
Do you-
sometimes I'll get real weird. Sometimes I go like, I read through everything and then I look up who the author is and I try to figure out like, I don't know, like, does this author sound
Yeah. I mean,
interesting?
you
Have
want
they
to
done anything?
you want to bring the highest quality thing
Yeah.
into the store. I mean, and we do have the luxury of, like, we have time.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
I got my Spring Week Mill in order, like my catalog a month ago.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to have to do anything about it for a month.
Right. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
so, but again, like, unless you're going to read every single book in the catalog,
Mhm.
and maybe you will read all three vaguely similar books, like, that's not outside of the realm of possibility for me.
No.
But, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, again, it is, like, it does feel like a vibes thing, and I do think that trusting yourself, because, like,
Yeah.
ultimately, I'm a lot like a lot of our customers, probably, right?
At the end of the day, like, if I can find some little nugget of interest in this thing that's been done to death, that's the one I'm gonna
Yeah.
go with. Something
Yeah.
has a really bitchin' cover, you're just like,
People are, I mean, and you
Yeah.
see it. You see people, you're standing at the register, you see people browsing, you see
Mhm.
what they pick up and turn over and look
Yeah.
at and read a few pages of.
yeah, we're magpies. We like pretty things. You know, like, we're just-
Do you read reviews on like NetGalley? Do you follow? Sometimes books go through, Twitter drama and stuff like that. I don't know if that
Yeah.
impacts decisions or not for booksellers.
I'm not very online.
No.
Which
That's
I
a good
think
thing. That's a good thing.
from a lot of things. But yeah, I look at bookseller reviews.
Yeah.
Like, those are the ones I look
Those
to,
are the ones
because
I look at too.
you know, blurbs from other writers,
Mhm.
you know, they are what they are. Like,
Yeah.
often I look at blurbs to sort of see what kind of book it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like a vibe check.
Yeah. Like, oh, you know, Elif Batuman, like, I
Mhm.
feel like I know what kind of book this is. What did she say about it? Like, I don't know. I didn't necessarily read it, but the bookseller reviews
It was a
are
triumph and a tour
a
de
triumph.
force. Yeah. But definitely on Edelweiss you can read like other booksellers' reviews of things. And
Yeah.
to me, I mean, of course there's politics in that too, because you have your rep saying, hey, please read this and review it. You know, if I send you this, will you review it? Will you nominate it for Indie Next? Like, there's pressures to like read a book and like the book and then glow about it in your review.
I mean, you're only reviewing things that you liked.
Yeah. I mean, generally speaking. And sometimes I think, I mean, there's pressure, even if you think it's not that great, to go on there and be like, oh, this author's at the top of their game, you know, or whatever.
Yeah.
But by and large, I do trust that, like, if a bookseller goes on and writes a really thoughtful review about why this book is worth reading, I trust that more than, like, I don't know, random Goodreads.
Yeah,
maybe.
I mean, I do think that just like nobody sits down for 400 words during the course of a busy workday where they're just like not making that much money for something they don't care about a little bit, you know?
I don't. Like, if I don't finish something, I'm not going to go on Edelweiss and be like, I didn't finish this.
I know, I'd rather shoot rubber bands at you and Jack, you know?
That's what we're going to do.
And so we've talked about a lot of different things that, might catch your eye or might factor in if you happen to see them, right? But I have to imagine that being sent a physical arc or a physical something factors pretty heavily, right? And that has a pretty high conversion rate on the bookstore side. But what does that look like from your perspective? How many titles get physical arcs or galleys or whatever you want to call them? What matters when that happens? And are there any other factors that are like, this really works on us, right? Like this will get me to at least give it a shot more times than not.
Yeah, the arc thing is hard to gauge. We get a lot.
We get a lot of arcs. And it's wild to hear you say that and I know that this is true.
Yeah.
That they don't do arcs for a lot of books, but when we're getting 5 copies of the same Pam Jenoff
Lisa
book,
Jewell,
like, it's like, why are you sending the same store 5 copies of this?
You know, and especially with I think people are active enough on Edelweiss. Like, they know what we read. Like, I got the same Churchill biography 3 times. I have never read a World War II book that I reviewed on Edelweiss. Like,
you sort of create a relationship with a rep, and sometimes say specifically, do you have an arc of this? If you don't have an arc, can you send me a finished copy? You know, like, I really want to read it. I'm really interested. I think it's going to be something that we can sell. And oftentimes they will do it. but the things that the publishers just send out, it feels random, and sometimes though it feels really pointed. I mean, again, it feels like you're really pushing this women walking away World War II in France book, you know, that like, again, I don't need six arcs of this, you know, like, could you maybe send me one arc and then maybe put some energy into like printing arcs for other titles that aren't, you know, saying Pam Jenoff just because that's what.
Well, well, they did. They sent us 4 of them.
Yeah, it's like too many. We don't need those.
No, and the other, I mean, and the other part of it is, I think, is making sure that things get in the right hands.
Yeah.
Like I mean, we at Auntie's, it probably doesn't matter that much because, you know, Kerry will get a big box of arcs, and you know, she just like puts it on by the microwave, and we all kind of pick through it. But like during the pandemic, especially, like things were getting sent to people's homes sometimes, and it was just like, oh, I sent an arc to this person, and I'm like, well, I mean, that person doesn't like that kind of thing.
And that is fun. I mean, I think we know each other well enough at the store to be like, this sounds like a Claire book, you know, like this sounds like a Jai book. This sounds like something Jeremy would like, you know, like we have a working knowledge of our own staff enough that we can do that. This is just a wasted opportunity. I mean, it seems like getting like smaller quantities of more titles out into the hands of booksellers seems like a better thing than just like, well, here's another one of this.
Yeah. You know? And I think we could, I mean, we all read a lot. Like we could absorb it. Yeah. You know?
Yeah. It is nice that the Edelweiss thing has opened that up a lot. I think.
There are way more digital review copies than there used to be, and that's awesome.
So you do have access to things that maybe they aren't throwing like so much money and effort behind. Like you don't get the physical copy, but you know what? I'll read it on my phone while I'm making spaghetti. You know, like I do that all the time. I'm learning I'm learning to love digital download stuff because I just get more access to a wider variety of things than they're going to print for us.
Well, I think we both pretty much now we have a physical book that's going and a phone book, which for me is usually an advanced reader copy.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. But yeah, it's weird. And then sometimes, every once in a while you get the cake pop phenomenon. Like every once in a while you get a big box that's like glossy and printed full color. It's like got all these graphics on the outside, and you open it and it's like, here's a pound of coffee, here's a candle, here's some nail polish, here's a copy of the book. It's all branded toward, and you're just like, whoa, like, why this one? Like,
well, I know, and it also like, I don't know how you feel about this, but I give 2 shits.
Well, yeah, I don't want nail
polish.
Like, oh, you think you can bribe me with nail polish? You know, I have no idea. It's a mystery to me.
Yeah.
Except for what I can think of like if there was like some sort of bidding war and like you've put a lot of money into it, so you need to like hustle to earn it back out. I mean, you know, like I think some of those are that, but it's a mystery to me. Like the things that sort of fly under the radar and you find later and you're like, this is an amazing book. Why didn't I know about this sooner? And the things that you're just like, okay, like stop beating me over the head with this. I get it. This book is coming out. I don't know. I don't know what the calculations are, but it's bizarre sometimes.
For debuts, I will say that my experience has been it's often very based on the editor. So if your editor is massively supportive of certain titles on their list, they work very hard to push that, and that enthusiasm feeds out to the sales teams and the sales reps, and then hopefully the booksellers. But it probably depends on each publisher, I'm guessing. I know that Harper, Voyager UK on this side, they have less titles and they try to give them all special things. So like Wayward hit shops over here recently, and they were giving away like themed t-shirts and stuff to booksellers and all kinds of stuff like that. So it can get, I think they're always trying to capture in this country the Instagram market and the book crate market, which are huge here, but not so much over there. And things that look good in photos are a big part of that. They're hoping for these influencer booksellers who will put it online.
Yeah, I will say too, like sometimes you're saying like an editor being particularly passionate about something, or a rep, like we do get those moments where you can tell, okay, this isn't some flashy PR thing that's happening, but it is like sometimes you get handwritten notes from editors or something, and they're like, I just wanted to make sure that I just wanted you to actually look at this because I really believe in it and I think it's something that's worth looking at. Yeah. And those, I feel like if anything, that's what kind of gets me when it's like, I've seen your other Edelweiss reviews. I really believe in this title. And I hope that you specifically, Kerry, read this book, you know, like, and I'm sure they're doing that with a ton of people. I know it's not just like, oh my gosh, they value my opinion so much. But it does kind of feel like, okay, this was more intentional than just like, hey, you work at a bookstore. Yeah. Want to send a candle? Like, no.
Did I hear right that you're getting personalized notes from editors at imprints?
Sometimes, yeah.
Is it editors? I mean, I feel like
feel
I
like-
get it a lot from.
I feel like it's the smaller, it's like Grey Wolf,
Yeah,
or like
something.
Yeah.
it's small
Yeah.
presses. But every once in a while, you do like every once in a
Yeah.
while, somebody is sending out like blasts where it's like, hey, this is a book that I think is really good, and the reps will do it too. Like the
Yeah,
reps,
no, and I trust my reps to like sort of know, because
Yeah.
we like my reps know my personal taste,
Yeah.
and they know, like, and I have explained to them what works in our store. Like they don't
Mhm.
work there, they can't know, but they like, I mean, they'll say for your store, like, and I also really loved this,
Yeah.
and it seems right up your alley, and
Yeah.
they know us, and I trust them.
And the
Yeah.
reps, I mean, there are really, really great reps, and there are really
Oh my god,
not so great reps.
Not to name any
Not
names.
gonna name any names at all, but some of them really do pay attention to what you like
Yeah.
and what you say works at the store, and others are just like, here, this is our lead read. You
Yeah.
should get 15 of them, and
Yeah.
you're like, okay, thanks.
Authors, sometimes they will approach us, like authors themselves, and being nice and like understanding that your booksellers are busy and just like being a good human.
Yeah.
It's like there was this one guy who wrote his name is John Searles. He's a very nice man.
It's very nice, yeah.
He would
it's
just,
great.
his husband was in town with like a touring production of like the Christmas Carol or something, and his husband came in and he was like, whose email can I get? My husband's book is coming out. And they were just like so gracious and lovely. And like we did a lot more work for John Searles than
yeah.
So I do. I mean, I would just encourage debut authors to just meet their booksellers. Like, just go in and introduce yourself and say, "Hi, this is my deal."
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was too shy to do that, and then a
Yeah.
couple of times when I was in town with my partner, and he would just go up to booksellers. He's like, "Look, this is my girlfriend. She's got a book coming out. Can I tell you about it?" And I was just like dying in a corner. Oh my
Yeah.
god!
I had that happen too. Yeah. No, I mean, and if I'm at the register, I'm like, okay, great, 3 on order. She's local.
Yeah. But it is hard. I mean, I imagine it would be. I mean, anytime you're trying to like
Schmooze.
sell yourself,
Yeah.
and then I mean, like
Exactly.
writing is such a like. I mean, like it's this thing that you've tended to for so long, and then all of a sudden you're having to like go out and be like, "Hey, I'm a salesperson now.
Yeah.
Here's my book." Like
here's my baby.
But like here's my baby. Please judge
Here's
it.
something that was really fun.
Yeah. Yep.
That I want you to have it.
Yeah. I mean, like again, and it's a question of like, do you have access to galleys and arcs that you can give to people? Like, which sucks if you don't. I mean, like that really kind of takes the wind out of your sails a little bit if you can't walk into a store and say, hey, I just wanted to drop this off for one of your buyers to look at or whatever. But even people like I'll get like postcards or letters or whatever addressed to me sometimes, and it won't have the actual copy of a book in it, but it's like it's just a thing that they've like, hey, I wrote this book. It's available on Ingram. This is a little bit what it's about. This is a little bit of my deal. I'd really appreciate it if you just looked at it. And I always look at them. Like I don't always buy them. They're not always right for the store. People self-publish a lot of things that are on wildly opposite ends of the spectrum, but I always look. Like if someone takes the time to write out a thing or make a little flyer and send it to me, I always check it out because I mean, like writing a book is a huge thing. Like I appreciate the time it takes to just make that happen, the time and the energy and the tears, the weirdness of that process. And I'm always down to like try to look at the fruits of somebody's labor in that way. Like,
I mean, and especially if they're in our region or community, because we are, I mean, like we are a community bookstore. Like that's something that I think we take seriously is like wanting to serve people in that way.
One thing to not do though, and this is something there was one guy in particular when I was the consignment manager who drove me insane with this. Don't go to the store and tell them to put your book on display. The displays are not for you as a local author to put your book on. They're for the store to highlight specific things that they want to highlight for whatever reason. There was this one dude who would come in like once or twice a month and just tell me like, you should put my book on the table. It's really good. If people knew about it, they would buy it. And I'd like looked at his book. I wasn't interested in it, and I wasn't going to read it. He was talking to one, the wrong person to try to convince of this, and two, he kept doing it, which just made it more frustrating every time I saw this guy. Letting the bookstore know that your book exists, great. Being nice to them, kind of building a relationship is a great idea. Harassing them because you think that they're not selling your book well enough is going to have the opposite effect. It's going to make them think you're a dumbass.
Yeah, do you remember that guy who asked like 3 different people on staff to read it? And so like one person was like nice enough to give him really honest feedback.
Yeah.
And then I remember he came up to me and was like, "Oh, I don't think that guy was the right audience. Will you read it?" And
that guy was wrong.
That guy was
you know.
Yeah.
He was ungodly.
He was like, he would come in and just like drop off more books without telling us.
Yeah,
just
he would
like
just
throw
like
them on the shelf.
Put them on the shelf, or he would like come in and like, because it's alphabetized by author's last name.
Yeah.
There's not, that's just the organizational style that we have adopted, and it makes sense. And he would come in and like take his book, move other books, and like misshelve it up high at like eye level, and it was just like, oh my god, man, you are doing everything you can to make all of the booksellers here like hate your guts. Like, how do you think that's going to pan out for you? You know, like, that's not, don't do that stuff. Don't do that stuff.
I'm in quite a few Facebook groups for writers online, and people do give each other that advice, and I think that's maybe part of where it comes from. You'll say people telling each other, you know, go and be persistent, keep doing, keep asking, put your books on shelves, and there's a gamut of bad advice online, and that's some of it. And I wonder if some of that comes from that culture in writing groups.
Like, I sympathize with people, really. And most people, I mean, and vastly, people are just like kind and polite and lovely.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but man, sometimes you just get some people who are so disconnected from reality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're like, well,
that
my
makes
book
sense.
is selling. And you're like, okay, well, have you talked to anyone about it? Have you tried to like set up, do you have an Instagram? And they're like, well, no, that's not my job. And it's like, well, it kind of is part of it, you know, like, unfortunately.
Especially selling
if you're self-published.
selling their book isn't necessarily your job. Your job is to make money for the bookstore, right?
Yeah. There's like a give and take, like we do what we can, but like there are ways for people to get their stuff out there, you know, like it can't just be, all right, I printed it and I threw it on a shelf. Done. You know, like that's
I mean, and maybe that used to work, but not
not now.
Yeah. And I mean, I have to say, this has been extremely interesting for me, even a year later, right? Like,
agreed.
It's almost exactly a year, actually, since my debut published. But I mean, especially before I had gone through some of it and learned any of this, I wouldn't have known, you know, like I did not have a clue what I could be doing. And the answer is probably still not much. But, you know, I didn't have a clue what I could be doing that would be on the good side of that line versus the bad, right? Like there's a lot of, I would guess, especially in the world of people who choose to spend thousands of hours writing books instead of, you know, like talking to people. There's a lot of hesitation when it comes to being that person, right? Who's in people's face about their own work in particular. Okay, we've covered pretty well, I think, you know, some of the different aspects, some of the different things that can affect whether something's ordered in the first place. But say you've ordered a book, you know, maybe you took a chance on a debut, or maybe it's even a pretty well-known name that you're used to ordering. What does the performance have to look like in terms of sales and velocity of sales for any given title for you to reorder? And at what point do you send a book back to the publisher, and what does that look like?
So we, generally speaking, and we have a bigger store than some, but if a book sells every 6 months, we get it back in. Because it takes a while for people to find books, you know. Again, there are a lot of them on the shelves. You can't put every single title that you have on a table. We just don't have space for that. So, if it sells every 6 months, we've got our point of sale system is great. We create a report every day that looks at the books that we sold the previous day. We go through everything that we sold the previous day and decide, like, on a one-by-one basis, like, do we want this back in? Do we need to delist it now?
Do we want to order more?
Right. Like, did TikTok pick it up and now all of a sudden we're selling insane amounts of it? Like, was it on Good Morning America and now everyone just is clamoring for this book that came out. And that's weird, like that The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse.
Hey,
book.
we finally got the title.
I know.
Yeah.
We get not The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and his hole, which is what we always joke about, which is terrible. It's really hard not to say after that. But yeah, that book had been out for like a year and a half, 2 years or whatever. And then all of a sudden, Christmas time, one year, it was a couple of years ago, it was like on Good Morning America or something. And we have consistently sold like, 10 to 25 copies of that book every month ever since that happened, which is insane.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably something we sell the most of in the store.
So we kind of go through every day, look at this report, what sold yesterday. And as you're looking at that, you can kind of see like, okay, this sold yesterday and it didn't sell before that since, I don't know, early 2021. Great. We're probably not going to get that back in. Or you look and it's like, yeah, like we sold it yesterday, but then we sold it the day before that. And then we sold it 2 days ago. And you're like, okay, instead of getting 1 copy in, we're going to do 3 copies or 4 copies, or again, like however much we think, like how many of these am I going to sell before I can get more in, like that kind of calculation.
Because the goal is to have it continually in stock.
Yeah.
It's something we want.
Yeah. If it's something that's selling really steadily, like it's just sort of death to be like, oh man, people are looking for this book, but we have to wait 3 days for it to get back in, because people say it. They just say it right out loud. All right, well, I guess I'll just order it from Amazon then. And then they just like walk out the door and you're like, shit.
Yep.
Okay.
Even though, I mean, and I think this is true of a lot of independent bookstores, we can get things really quickly.
We can.
In 2 days, a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't know. People like to punish us for that.
Yeah.
People like to punish us.
But no, my favorite thing is when they're like just saying it like they're doing you a favor. Oh, no, it's okay. You don't have to order it. I can.
I'll just get it off Amazon. Like, okay.
No, it's
okay.
So what is the middle of the road look like, right? Like what did that book have to do to stay on your shelves for a year and a half? And at what point are you actually shipping stuff back to the distributor or whoever you ordered from?
Yeah.
Versus letting it just sell out and not order more.
Yeah, if we look at, and we also will do sort of poll reports where we kind of create a report and say, okay, tell me everything in the biography section that hasn't sold at all in 12 months.
Yeah,
or 8 months. Yeah,
is what I like, especially stuff that gets really crowded, like biography.
Yeah,
many biographies come out, many current affairs books come out that are no longer relevant, so that might be like a shorter time frame for the report for sending things back.
Yeah. And you do a whole lot of the return time.
Oh yeah,
in the store,
which is some things. It's like when I first got there, I remember looking and like we hadn't sold a copy of like Breakfast at Tiffany's in 9 months. Right. But I'm not going to pull that. Like that's something we probably need to have. That's something that somebody is going to look for.
Yeah.
But like the random celebrity memoir, if it hasn't sold in 8 months, it's
be done with it.
Yeah, like fuck it, it's going in the box. I'm sending it back to Penguin, and we get full credit at most of the big guys, and we can send them back if it is still in print. We can send it back. So we have a lot of flexibility, and that also like enables us to take chances in our front list buying. Yeah, and it is kind of nice for me at least to kind of be on both ends of that. So if I'm doing polls for return, I can say, oh, I like know that somebody went heavy on the ordering side, and here I am sending 6 back, or here I am only sending 1 back because the paperback's coming out. Yeah.
That's another thing we were talking about. Every time there's been an embarrassing amount of some book going back to the publisher, it's because I didn't think it was going to work, and my rep talked me into, instead of getting 2 copies, maybe you should get 12 because it's a really big deal, and da-da-da. And then, okay, fine, I don't get 2, I get 12. And how many do we sell? 2. And we send 10 back, and it's just like, damn it. Because we know what sells in the store better than, the sales rep who is doing the best they can, but they have pressures from above, and they're also wrangling like how many different bookstores in the region. Like they don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's an eye-opening experience. Once we started really doing polls regularly, it was like, oh wow, like that's such a huge part of being an informed buyer is like knowing what goes back, like what's been sitting on the shelf and taking up space.
Because it is, I mean, it does feel, and I feel like I feel this on like kind of an emotional level sometimes. Like I'll be doing polls for return, and I'll like be like, oh, but I liked
Yeah,
this.
I know.
Oh, it's so good. So, like, and then I'll usually keep it in store because I can hand sell it or whatever.
Right.
But then like when you're buying, you see that, like you feel that. You're like, what if like this is the book that somebody's gonna love, and it's gonna we buy one copy and it's like
I know.
and it languishes, but
that's a hard that's a thing. Like one copy is just like no one's gonna see this, like but I can't get 6 copies of everything and throw it on a table, like it's hard to make those decisions. But the return thing is really nice. It's unique to the book selling world too. Like,
and I think it's how bookstores have managed to stay healthy businesses, because it does. Like, it enables us to take chances, and it also enables us to like have enough stock that people are interested in coming in.
Yeah. So am I hearing right that there's not necessarily like a set time frame? It sounds like bios it makes sense. Biographies make sense to have maybe a shorter time frame, but other than that, there's not like a set time frame. A book that you take a chance on has like a year or 6 months or whatever to make it. It's kind of, well, if you sold half of them, maybe we'll stick it out and see what happens.
I think the general rule of thumb we go by is 6 months. Something has to sell 1 copy every 6 months, and then we kind of reconsider. And if it's something that no one has any kind of emotional attachment to, it probably goes back. Again, if it's that thing where you're like, oh, but I really like this, then you're like, okay, you know what? I'm going to make this work then. Like, I want to have this in the story. I believe in this book. I'm going to write a shelf talker. I'm going to put it on a table.
It's sort of our hack. Like, I remember we didn't have any of the culture books in stock, and I was really mad about that. So I wrote a shelf talker for Player of Games, and we got 5 more in, and now it sells regularly.
Yeah.
So like, it's if there's a book that we want to keep and we want to sell, we can generally make it happen.
Yeah. People for some reason think we know what we're talking about when it comes to books. The general rule for me, someone is like, hey, I really want to get this book in. It's been delisted. Like, we used to carry it. It didn't sell, but I really like this book, and I think we should have it.
On staff.
Yeah. Like one of our employees. It's like, great, order a few copies, but like, write a shelf talker. Like, if we're going to get this back in, like, make it happen. Like, if you believe in this book, throw your weight behind it a little bit. And every time someone has done that, it worked. I think the power of booksellers is pretty good. I mean, at least in our own little store, like, we sold some weird titles just because someone loved it, Yeah,
we've even, I think about that Ketchup Factory book.
Yeah.
Like, that's a self-published book that we took on consignment. We have it on one of our, like, semi-permanent displays. And, I mean, we're probably doing 4 or 5 a month, which is really good.
Yeah. Again, it's the power of, like, if you have a book and you can get it into the hands of a bookseller, you can get a bookseller to like it, like, at least that's one store that's going to be like on board to help people find it for you, and honestly, part of the problem is just there's so many for us to see, that it does sometimes take somebody being like, hey, look at this one though. Like, this one is the one you want to read next. And it's like, okay, maybe like, let's try it. And it works. It totally works.
Given that you guys are so important to the whole publishing ecosystem, and I really do think that booksellers are like the great foundation of our industry, what do you wish publishers understood about the bookselling experience?
We want more arcs.
I don't want 6 copies of Babel. I want 1 copy of everything.
And again, I think it's a symptom of these behemoth catalogs, that like where they can't pay close attention to every single thing, when there were multiple smaller publishing houses. And like, I mean, that's what I appreciate about things like, I don't know, like Soft Skull or Verso or, some of these Grey Wolf, who their catalogs are much smaller, but they will email you and say like, here are the 8 books that are coming out, this quarter. Like, here's a write about, like a thoughtful write up about all of them. Here's my personal email address if you want to see anything. Like, I mean, I don't know how publishers could go back from that. I mean, they don't want to. Clearly,
they're too big too. Like, they literally couldn't do it. It's logistically too much.
That's a gripe that I don't know what the answer to is.
One thing that I wish they were better at was cover art. There are so many books that come out that have cover, like, I'm thinking of the Gene Wolfe re-releases from Tor. The covers of those are awful, and it's really hard to hand sell them because you show them to people and you're like, this is, I'm trying to sell Fifth Head of Cerberus or whatever, and I'm explaining it's like one of the most interesting science fiction things I've ever read, but they're looking at this cover that's like a chain link fence, and they're like, what are you talking about? This looks awful, right? I think that publishers don't really understand the degree to which that is the thing that gets people to stop and look at a book and pick it up and start thinking about whether they want to buy it. And when all the books on the shelf look the same, it doesn't help anyone, right?
Yeah. The other thing I would say is I want more trade paperback originals.
Yeah. Yes.
So few people are going to spend $30 on a hardcover book, and we have a really good track record with things that initially come out in paperback. Somebody will spend $10 fewer on that, and then you'll sell 6 more.
Well, and I mean, the latest round of front list that I'm working on, hardcovers are now solidly $30. You know, it's not 26 anymore. It's not 27. It's like 30 to 35 bucks for just like new authors, people are taking a chance on. Like, I don't understand why they're just clinging to the hardcover format as much as they are.
Yeah, I mean, and it makes sense for your Diana Gabaldon,
or
your Prince Harry, or
oh my God.
Or your Obama, the nerve of that man to charge $45 for his biography.
But to be like, here's this new author, you haven't heard of them. Oh, you don't want to spend $35 on this book? Oh, well, then I guess this author doesn't work. It's like, well, no,
and their career's over.
This is a sore point for Scott.
No, it's kind of bullshit. It's just like you're setting people up.
Yeah, I mean,
it's like an uphill climb for sure.
I mean, if I have to spend $7 on a loaf of bread, like
right? Like, come on. Yeah, paperback originals. I want more.
I want way more paperback originals. Yeah,
I love a paperback original. Something comes out. If honestly, in some ways, that's like a signal to me that it's a book that I'm gonna like. If it doesn't come out in hardcover first, it's a paperback original. I'm like, okay, this is gonna be a little bit weirder, a little bit more literary, a little bit more experimental, like whatever. There's some angle to this that's going to speak to me a little bit more. I don't know. It's to me, it's
that's
like,
interesting. That's really interesting. And my guess there, this is not an authoritative answer, but my guess is margins, right? I would guess that the margins for publishers are a lot better on hardcovers because they're probably not spending that much more on, some extra thick cardstock.
That actually, I would just assume hardbacks were way more expensive. So
no, I think they make more money on them, but it's like
they make more money.
Yeah,
and we get better royalties.
So this is a rumor, and I'm fully willing to be a rumor monger, but I've actually heard, and I want to know if you all have heard of this, but I've heard that some publishers will actually take unsold hardcovers, tear them apart, debind them, or whatever you call it, and turn it into a trade paperback for the next, round.
Huh.
Oh, I haven't heard that. I wonder if
that seems.
Yeah, I haven't heard that either.
I couldn't believe it, but it was an industry insider who told me this.
Interesting.
And I still don't believe it, but yeah.
That's weird.
Well, I'm gonna start looking for damaged copies.
Yeah, how would they even do that? Like physically, that doesn't make sense to me. But yeah,
I don't see how that would be any less of a process.
Yeah, and also like shelf wear and tear is not nothing.
Yeah.
I would guess it's probably not on returned books. I would guess it's the stock that sat in their warehouse or whatever with the publisher, if that even happens. But anyway.
Yeah, reminders.
I think it all feeds into a bigger divide where it becomes this thing of like, well, people don't tend to spend for hardcovers, so we're going to only have a few of our titles who are hardcovers, and we want people to buy them, so then all the money goes into those few books every season. And on the UK side, the hardcover thing is huge. It's tied up with prestige. It's tied up with kind of literary respect, I guess.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, I do think there's sometimes, even just like, it's like, well, this is a paperback release, though. It's like this sort of tone of, I don't know, amongst even the reps a little bit, but it's like, I don't know, I'm all for it. Sometimes it's great. Sometimes it's like a smaller press or it's just something kind of weird, which, I'm all about weird stuff. But sometimes you can tell it's like, it feels like, oh, they don't believe that this is going to be a thing, like it's like pointed.
Yeah. I mean, and that makes sense to me. Like if we think
the
about like
prestige
what,
thing.
well, more just the like taking chances thing. Like, I mean, it is like, Diana Gabaldon is going to sell X many, but like a debut author writing, something like that's not historical fiction.
Right. Well, that One's Company.
Yeah.
That novel came out. That was a paperback original.
Ashley Hudson.
Yeah.
It's great.
It's great, but it's weird. It's like, it's got kind of a weird premise. Like you could see, but I feel like that was perfect because someone's not going to take a chance on kind of a weird woman wins lottery and proceeds to recreate the Three's Company universe on a secluded mountain. Like that's a weird premise for a book. And I'm not necessarily going to spend $32 to take a chance on it, but I will spend $16 to take a chance on it.
I mean, and do you think that I think we as a store, I mean, if we had ordered, 3 or 4 of those on hardcover, I think we as a store made a lot more money on it in paperback than we could have if it was a hardcover.
Yeah, because we've sold way more.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, we both read it ahead of time. And I was like, this is going directly on my staff favorites. And so, like it's just right there for people to see. But
but I feel like that happens a lot on our end.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I will go heavy on something because it's cheaper and I think we can move it more.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. This is a selfish question because my paperback just came out last month. But does this apply to, a paperback that comes out after a hardcover as well, especially in the case where maybe the hardcover launch didn't go great, right?
Yeah.
But do you pay attention to formats in that case, or is it mostly when it's a trade paperback release from the get-go?
No, there have definitely been books where I've been like, shit, I don't think I can sell this as a hardcover. But a year from now, when it comes up in catalogs as paperback, I'm going to get them to put on the new release paperback table, because it's like, again, $30 versus $16 is a huge jump,
and typically if I see that I sold, 3 copies of this book in hardcover, I'm like, okay, it'll go, like maybe I'll do 4 or 5 in the paperback for an initial order when it first releases.
Yeah. Like you can very safely be like, we sold X amount in hardcover. I'm going to double that for my initial run of paperback.
But then also, kind of the other thing that Kerry was saying, like, I'm not sure about this, but I do believe it will go in paperback.
Well, because when you think about people who buy hardcovers, I feel like it's like really hard fans of people with a lot of throwaway income, like people, and then people who are just like so wrapped up in like, oh, everyone's reading this and I have to read it too,
or like people who don't really know how to browse in a bookstore too, I think.
Or people who only buy 3 books a year, so it's like, I'm only buying 4 books a year. I can afford to spend $35 on them versus, no, I'm eating books every day. Like I can't drop $100 on 3 books,
Yeah, like I never used to buy hardbacks until I worked at the store and I could get them at, half price basically. I used to be, I would wait for things in paperback. And so I totally think that publishers shoot themselves in the foot with a lot of releases. I think authors like having their book come out in hardback because, as Cindy was saying, it feels like, oh, I got a hardback. I'm important. But it can be a bad thing. It can definitely make it harder to move copies because people don't know who you are. They don't want to spend that much money on something they don't know about.
Well, that's interesting. Maybe I should start paying more attention to my paperback. Oh, goodness gracious. Well, I'm just about out of questions. You have given us so much good information that I really don't think is common knowledge. Maybe I'm just dumb. Dumber than average, but
I've got one more for JT, actually, for Jeremy.
Yeah, let's hear it.
What was it like having a debut book come out and also being a bookseller? Because I feel like we get told so little, but you've got a foot in each world.
Yeah.
Did they ever try and bullshit you, tell you things that you were just like, no, that's not how it works?
Well, no. So my experience is a little weird because my book is published by a major publisher in the UK, but was essentially self-published in the United States. I did have the advantage of knowing how book distribution works. So when we were setting up my self-publishing thing, I knew what I needed to make sure was possible. Like the book needed to be returnable. It needed to be at a 40% discount to the bookstores. stuff that needed to be available through Ingram. And so I was able to like make all of that help happen, which I think is why it's done okay. You know, we sell a lot at Auntie's, but it does sell in a few other independent bookstores around the country. Galance has been pretty straightforward with me. Like we've kind of talked about this in the Discord a bit, but I have not had the experience of my editor telling me something that turned out to be false. Pretty much everything that they've told me has happened. But also I was not like a huge deal, and they were never trying to convince me that I was going to be a huge deal. So there were moments where like I heard a number and I was like, that number doesn't sound right. Like they would tell me, you know, this is your initial print run, or this is what we want your initial print run to be. And I was like, I bet it'll be half that. And I was right, you know, but I don't think that was them like bullshitting me. I think that was them being optimistic and then like it not, and then, you know, other things happen and it didn't turn out as well as they had hoped. But the one thing that's really cool about being a bookseller and an author is like those weird interactions I'll get to have where I'm working at the store and somebody's like just picked my book up off the shelf and is going to buy it. I'm like, oh, I wrote that. And then they're like, what? And then I'll sign it for them, and it's cool.
It was really fun when you came in on pub day. It was like, Jeremy, you're here.
Oh yeah, I went in the day it came out and signed a bunch, and that was cool. But I think I also just have the advantage of like working at a bookstore. I know a lot of booksellers, and I know how booksellers think. So when I'm talking to people trying to convince them to carry the book, I know kind of like what works and what doesn't, and what's annoying and what's helpful and all of that. Plus, like I have a bunch of champions at Auntie's who hand sell the book for me, and it's got like 3 shelf talkers on it or something. So that definitely awesome. Doesn't hurt.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you, man.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm done. And that was a wealth of information. Thank you all so much for coming on and telling us all that. Kind of wish I'd known it 2 years ago, or at least that Scott had known it 2 years ago.
Yeah. Where were you all a year and a half ago? I guess one last thing. Yeah. Totally your fault. I guess one last thing before we sign off. Do you have anything you want to plug? Give a quick shout out to Auntie's in Spokane, and maybe even give authors a way to send buyers your way if that's a thing.
Yeah, so Auntie's, if you're local, we're just right downtown, heart of Spokane. Pretty easy to find. We also have auntiesbooks.com, our website. We ship all over the country. So yep, that's us. You can find out about events and book clubs and whatever it is we're doing on the website.
Yeah, and if you want to get a hold of a buyer, the best way is just to call and say, this is my book.
Yeah.
And they'll give you the right
email. They'll give you the right email. What else? We have our little radio show, a book show where we talk about books called Dummy Copy on TPG Radio here in Spokane.
Feel free to plug yourself, JT.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm JT Greathouse. My book, The Hand of the Sun King, is the first in the Pact and Pattern trilogy from Galance and Jabberwocky in the United States. You can get signed copies from Auntie's Bookstore. Order them online. You can leave a little note if you want me to draw something in it. Thanks for having us on. It was really fun to chat. And
it's our pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. This is super fun.
Yeah, thank you guys for spending an hour and a half with us. This has been amazing.
You've been listening to the Publishing Radio Podcast with Sunny Dean and Scott Drakeford. Tune in next time for more in-depth discussion on everything publishing industry. See you later.